Faith Fulfilled, Book 1, Chapter 9. A Broken Man.
I'm afraid Ray has found the boy, according to our spies.
Brian said, bowing to his father.
Just as I predicted. Has he begun training him?
No. He is currently trying to recruit him, but I assure you, I can dispatch my pawns, and they can find him before Ray has a chance to train him.
That will not be necessary. Ray is too weak to reveal to the boy of his origins, but he eventually will have to. And when he does, it will destroy the boy's spirit. Then I will be able to corrupt his soul, all of his power, all of his knowledge of the last remaining survivors, all of his skill with the blade. That will be intensified by his upcoming training. Will all be for us to control. As a matter of fact, send the pawns. If Michael can't handle those two, then he isn't worth being in our service.
As you wish, Father.
The smoke faded into the air, and with it the tremendous heat that emitted from it. Brian rose from his knees and watched as the doors of the room opened. Ebony walked in.
What are the orders from our master?
Clyde began giggling every time Michael walked by.
For not your sake, Clyde. The fight happened days ago. Stop laughing at me.
Destiny.
It's just so funny.
It's really not.
Mike said, rolling his eyes. Clyde continued laughing on.
Clyde, give me a break. Need I remind you what day is coming up?
Clyde's laughing instantly stopped, his smile replaced with a frown. Before he could say anything, Mike walked away. Destiny exited the blacksmith, delighted after getting a sweet bargain. Her pleasure was cut short as she watched Mike walk past in visible distress. She walked over to Clyde, who was looking down on the ground.
What's going on?
Clyde said nothing, and continued to stare at the gravel road below him.
Hello? Anyone in there?
Clyde finally lifted his head and met her gaze.
Sorry, I was just deep in thought.
What's going on with you two?
Nothing, Destiny.
Hey, the babe is back.
Destiny spun around to find Lucas looking at her with a sly face.
Who's this freak?
Oh, such harsh words from such a pretty face.
Lucas exaggerated, placing a hand over his heart.
Truthful words.
What's that? I couldn't hear you.
Lucas said, putting his hand to his ear.
He said they were truthful words.
Such cruelty!
Why'd you even come over here anyway?
Oh, right. That weird old dude is in the village again looking for Mike.
Oh, well, about that.
Clyde looked up at the hill that Mike went up.
Did you finally beat him in a duel and he's mad about it?
Destiny and Clyde both looked over at Lucas and rolled their eyes.
What?
No, Lucas. Mike went home.
Should we go after him?
No, he's going through a real hard time right now. Leaving him alone might be the best idea.
If you're an idiot.
Destiny walked away from the situation and toward the blacksmith. She walked on out of sight from Clyde and Lucas, and followed where Mike left. Walking through the village, she found many emerald green eyes looking at her. Destiny made her way to the house. It had many windows on it, with one side of the house having blue windows, and the other having red. She looked in the red side to see if she could make anything out. After finding nothing, she saw herself in through the already open door. She'd find Mike staring out the window, expressionless.
Michael?
She said, walking forward. He said nothing and continued to stare. No emotion whatsoever seen in his face from the window reflection.
What happened with you and Clyde down at the village?
Nothing that you can fix.
Just talk to me, Mike. What's going on?
Mike let out a sigh.
It's just too far beyond your understanding or comprehension.
How do you know?
Mike turned to face her, his eyes bloodshot and watery. Obviously, he had been crying.
Mike, something keeps troubling you. It's not gonna go away unless you talk about it.
Mike said nothing and looked up at the ceiling.
I see the hate in your eyes. Clyde might not see it, but I do.
You're quite perceptive. However, you still couldn't possibly help. I appreciate that you want to, but trust me, it's beyond what you can fix.
Give me a chance.
Right now, the best thing you can do for me is to just let me be alone.
What I told you to do from the beginning.
A voice from behind said. Destiny jumped in surprise and turned around to face Clyde, who was showing visible signs of annoyance.
Let's go.
Clyde motioned toward the open door. The two exited the building, leaving Mike alone as he requested. Standing outside the door, Destiny looked up to Clyde and asked.
Why? What's wrong with him?
Clyde just sighed and said,
Alright, it's gonna be a long story, so let's find a place to sit.
They made their way to Mike and Clyde's fishing dock and sat at the very edge of the wooden structure. The water rippled gently as the day entered its final hours.
Alright, tell me. Why does there always seem to be something troubling him?
Remember when you told him that he isn't your father and he got upset?
Yeah?
This is gonna explain that too.
Clyde closed his eyes and took a deep breath.
You know, there was a time when Mike would fight with talent and grace instead of fueling himself with anger. A time when he used to be happy. One day, me and him were roaming through a forest in the middle of a stormy night. We were looking for an abandoned temple, rumored to be in the area. It was so dark, but the lightning lit up the area for brief instances. The storm was so bad, and even the mobs of the night were nowhere in sight. They didn't dare risk going out in that monster of a storm.
Clyde paused and continued to breathe deeply.
The sun began to finally rise, so we could start to see again. However, the storm still raged on. Mike said he saw a figure in the distance, sitting in front of a tree. We got our weapons out under the impression it was an enemy. But as we got closer, we saw that it was no enemy. It was a child. He was slouched up against the trunk of a tree, soaked in water and leaves. Mike checked for a pulse on the boy, but when he felt a heartbeat, he put the child over his shoulder and told me we had to go back home.
Where did this kid come from?
I don't know, but we took him home. Mike took good care to make sure that he made a full recovery. We tried to find his parents to return him, but we couldn't find them. The child couldn't recall anything before the storm, so we had no one to take the kid. Mike decided that we should take care of him. At first, I was against it, but Mike assured me that he could take on the responsibility. He decided to name the child Drake.
Drake?
Yeah, those two. They did everything together. He taught Drake how to fish from the very lake. They'd have competitions to see who could make the most catches in a certain time frame. Drake would sometimes push Mike into the pond and laugh as Mike dragged him in too. He taught Drake how to cook, craft, build, and even to fight when he got older.
Sounds like this kid means a lot to him.
Mike once told me that Drake was like a son to him. He was everything to him.
I see.
Mike taught Drake to be a formidable swordsman. Drake was adventurous, just like Mike is. The three of us would go on adventures all the time. I could tell you so many stories of how Drake saved me and Mike's lives. This kid was such a warrior, but yet he was still a child to the core.
What happened to him?
Clyde's eyes snapped open. He looked up at the slowly setting sun and gathered the strength to say the words he needed to say.
One night, Mike and Drake went out to face the monsters, like they always did. It was a clear night, not a cloud in the sky. You could see all the beautiful stars above. Something was off, and we noticed it immediately. There were no monsters to be seen. They were just gone. I decided to stay inside the house that night and sleep it off. Mike and Drake went off to the forest to find some zombies. Still nothing. Mike proposed that they split up to cover more ground, so they did just that. As Mike continued running in his direction for a while, he stopped, dead in his tracks. He could hear a scream over in the opposite direction. He ran back as fast as he humanly could towards the sound. The screams then stopped. Mike kept running and running and running. He eventually found himself in an opening in the center of the forest.
Clyde swallowed a gulp of air, his voice becoming shaky.
He would find Drake on the ground, motionless. Mike went to his side to try and wake him up. He shook, he yelled, he did everything he could, but no response. That's when he noticed the sword stuck inside Drake's back. At first, he was paralyzed. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Once he snapped out of the trance, Mike let out screams, hollers, call them what you will. They were so loud and strong I could hear them all the way over here. I would arrive at the scene and find Mike at Drake's side. The cries I heard, I didn't think he was capable of producing. His eyes were flooding with tears, his body was shaking like an earthquake, and his cries of agony were piercing. He put his trembling hand on Drake's lifeless cheek. When I saw them, I can never forget. I saw something in Mike's eyes that I had never seen before. I saw sadness, I saw anger, but overall, what I saw the most in those eyes was hate. Hate towards himself.
Destiny couldn't think of any way to possibly respond to what she was hearing.
From that day forward, Mike was never the same. That child was Mike's entire world. So when he lost him, it was like he lost his entire world. Mike blames himself for Drake's death. Says that if he hadn't suggested they split up, he'd still be alive. Mike acts happy and cheerful sometimes, but I know he never truly is. He simply puts up an act so that people don't feel bad for him. He also believes that showing his crippling depression inside is a sign of weakness. There is so much hatred in his heart, Destiny. So much pain, so much loss. I've tried everything to help him, but to no success. He just always wants to be alone. The anniversary of Drake's death is approaching. This is the time when it's hardest for Mike to hide his anguish.
Destiny looked down in disbelief.
So you see, when you told him that he isn't your father, you reminded him of his failure to protect his son. It's been 4 years, Destiny, and he still treats it like it just happened.
I don't know.
I know finding your words aren't easy with a story like that.
Clyde says, leaning back on his two hands and looking at the pale sky slowly turning darker. Destiny leans forward on her knees and looks down at her reflection in the water.
I just don't know what to do at this point. He lives every day pretending he's okay, when I know he isn't.
He just needs to find a better distraction.
Destiny quickly sits up.
How's that supposed to work?
I don't know. We just need to make him actually happy. Maybe we could find a new hobby for him? Something that doesn't remind him of Drake?
Good luck with that. I've exhausted everything I can think of to try and help. But obviously it hasn't worked.
Destiny again looked down at the rippling water beneath her feet.
Well, we have to try something. He can't go through the rest of his life hating himself.
We? Yeah, there's no we in this one. I've done what I can. I'm not gonna waste my energy on something that's guaranteed to fail.
Getting up off the wooden planked dock, he took one last look at the rising moon above, then walked away. Destiny could only watch in shock, seeing how easily he could give up on his best friend.